welcome to Yelm High School students. Welcome everyone as you're coming in. We are excited to host the Professionals by Pathway Exploration event to help you connect your learning to career opportunities, right? Great opportunity for you. I am Paula Petersen, Ms. P, to those of you who know me, and I'm excited to welcome my former student, who I'm very proud of, Katie Marchbanks. She's our guest today, and she is going to be sharing the story of how she got to where she is in her career pathway or professional pathway. So just so that all the students know, this is being recorded so that future students can watch it and you can come back and see it again if you missed something. We have about 30 minutes or so, and I'll be monitoring the questions and making sure that Ms. Marchbanks gets her questions so that she can answer those for you. So feel free to put those in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And welcome, Ms. Marchbanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you again. I'm Katie Marchbanks, and I am a college professor of public speaking and interpersonal communication right now at Spartanburg Community College in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So how I got started was, we're going way back in time here. When I was a sophomore in high school, I had the option to take a rhetoric class instead of an English class with Miss P. And that if you had told 16-year-old me all the way back then that, that I eventually was going to make a career out of that was going to be my whole future, I would not have seen that coming. But it turns out that the competitive speech and debate club that the school had was just the biggest piece of my high school experience and career. It's all my social bonds that I can remember, all of the weekends and all the things, and especially spending so many hours, 3 years in a row in Miss P's classroom really stood out to me. So yeah, and it's like, that's really, really what I remember the most. And then I graduated high school in 1999. And that was an actually historic career or time for me to decide my career. So I knew that I was headed off to Michigan to school, and I didn't quite 100% figure out what it was that I wanted to do with my career or anything. But of course, I instantly kind of followed the footsteps of a favorite teacher and decided that I wanted to be a high school English teacher. And I remember Miss P actually saying something very important to me during that time, which we'll kind of refer to back to in a second. In April of 1999 was the Columbine shooting had happened. And I remember right after that had happened, we all kind of came back to school kind of unsure of what was going, like how to approach things. It was very weird. The following week, there were like bomb threats and like we had to treat it like a fire drill. It was all so odd. And I remember Miss P saying to me, she goes, "Are you sure you want to be a school teacher now? It's not exactly a safe profession." Right. And I really took that to heart because immediately I had to imagine myself not as the students that were involved in that tragedy, but as the teacher that was involved, the teachers that were there, the ones that stood in front of their students or got them to safety and had to think, well, if I was in that position, would I be able to do that? Luckily, I didn't have to necessarily make that choice within the moment or anything like that. From then on, that really changed teacher education. So when I did go into university, the student teaching experience and the teacher education experience continuously included things like hostile intruder training. So that has actually been a continuous element of my field. But to just kind of reiterate some of my background then and how public speaking followed my way through, I started off at a community college. I went to Lansing Community College for my first 2.5 years of school. And that was okay. but those were probably some of the hardest years of my young adult life. And I can honestly tell any of the young people who are watching this right now that college was not easy for me. And I'm really, really glad that I chose the community college route. I think if I went straight into a university right away, I may not have had the success that I'm experiencing now in my career. I'm not sure if I would have finished college. And I think the small classroom size, the community element of a community college made all the difference in the world in my continuing education. But once I did finally transfer to a university, what ultimately changed everything was the availability of a competitive speech and debate team at Central Michigan University. So I was able to join that team and compete again. And I already had 3 years of background experience in competitive speech to guide me away. It helped me with things like scholarships and other opportunities. And I also learned multiple forms of debate, and I really excelled in the parliamentary debate field. That was super fun compared to other forms of debate that are a little bit more scripted and structured. Parliamentary debate is a little bit more extemporaneous, impromptu, and there were some tactics and things like you can heckle your opponents, you can interrupt them, you can stand up and ask questions in the middle of their speech, you can knock on the table when you hear a good argument, just like in Parliament, like here, here, right? And so it was really, really fun. I did finish my bachelor's degree in secondary education. I did really think that I was going to be a high school English teacher, but the student teaching experience really did change all of that for me. So that was great. My host teacher was a wonderful woman. She'd been teaching 35 years in the public schools, and I was really glad that she was my host teacher. And she says I was one of the top 2 best student teachers she had ever seen. But it was also probably the most stressful 4 months of education, being in that classroom, being with those students. There was a week where my host teacher was gone for an entire week because her father passed away. And that left me completely in charge of those students without that sort of like guidance and supervision. And during that week, there was a lockdown and a big drug bust at the whole school. And like my high school freshmen were getting plucked out of the classroom one by one by the principal with fearful looks because they're all ratting on each other. And they, did a dog search and all of that, and this was at a school that was very way out in the cornfields of nowhere, Michigan, right? Kids drove their snowmobiles and tractors to school. And so I remember there was a fight in the hallway, like one kid stole another kid's deer blind. So that caused a fight, right? I got a lot of great experiences, but ultimately just those few months caused so much stress that I was getting like chronic bloody noses and really not adapting very well to the disciplinary elements of teaching. But I finished my degree anyway, and immediately the head coach of the Central Michigan speech and debate team encouraged me to apply to a graduate program. So through that, I was able to go immediately in and get my master's at CMU. And as a piece of that, I was also teaching college public speaking 101 and an assistant coach to the speech and debate team. So then I got to turn that role, become a coach, and then I really excelled in coaching parliamentary debate, which was great. We got to take our students to Oregon for nationals. It was a lot of traveling, got to take our students all over the country for amazing experiences, things I would have never seen coming. One year, I took a group of debaters to Boston for a tournament at Suffolk University, and it was the 2006 nor'easter. The weather blew through and we got snowed in to the tournament, and they had to cancel the tournament. And so we just got to hang out with the other teams from all over the country, and the kids from the University of Florida had never seen snow in their lives. And they they went out and played in it and stuff. And us tough Michiganders were like, this is nothing for us. They thought it was wonderful. So I loved all of those experiences. And I can definitely say that, competing in the collegiate level, without that connection, without that community there, they helped me through the hardest times of my young adult life. I may not even be alive today without them. So I really attribute a lot of that. Once I left graduate, it was only a 2-year program within the classroom. It still took me a very, very long time to actually finish and complete my master's degree. So it took me 6 years to get my undergraduate degree and another 5 years to finish my master's degree. So I love to tell students that it's just because you're successful didn't mean it necessarily comes easy. In fact, all the way through college, I worked hard, but nothing would frustrate me more than to talk to peers who were like, yeah, I didn't study, but I got an A. And I'm like, I studied so hard for that C+, it does take a lot of work. But once I shifted from public school to teaching college, there was no going back for me. I got all the joy of teaching all the things that I love and the excitement of teaching without the kind of disciplinary and the parental elements that go over it. But however, my experience in both fields is probably why I'm incredibly sought after and valued in the community college setting, is that I have experience teaching both types of students. And if you are considering pursuing public speaking or community college professor or teaching college, you have to know how to teach to every age, right? Now, high schoolers are 14, 15, 16 going into college, early college. And I also, community college really services our entire community. So my oldest students have been 72 or even 85 finishing their associate's degrees. And I love that mix. I love that mix of these young people that are like, this is scary, this is college, this is new. And then these other people who barely know how to use a computer and like, this is work, right? And it shows both people on all parts of that spectrum what real hard work looks like and how much getting an education really, really means to them. So I'm going to do a quick little screen share to bring you to where we are now. So now I'm at Spartanburg Community College. I finished my master's degree back in 2010. And then in 2014, I had another massive life change where just about everything in my personal life fell apart all at the same time, and I restarted my life all over again. So in 2014, I finished up at, I had been teaching as an adjunct at a lot of different colleges in Michigan, at Delta College, at Northwood University. I was still coaching there. I was the lead director of debate for the Intercollegiate Speech League of Michigan. So I was doing a lot of debate-oriented things. And then I also was adjuncting at Kirtland Community College. And there was 2 semesters which I taught all 3 of those schools at the same time. I was driving everywhere. And that got me the Lynn Hitley Award for Distinguished Service. Basically at Delta College, I was Adjunct of the Year for being so accommodating and going to all these different places. And I was especially driving to like the Voc Tech centers to teach dual enrolled high school students at the same time. And in the February snow of Michigan, that is no easy task. So I look back on all of that going, wow, right? That was incredible. And so many stories along the way. So ultimately, then I was offered a very temporary full-time position at Delta College that was only meant to last 3 years. And I knew that going in. And because my life was kind of changing as of 2014, I knew that I was going to have to make a big career change and career shift. And I really didn't want to leave Delta College. I just didn't want to go back to adjuncting once I was a full-time professor. It was really hard to say, like, to know your worth and your value and to get paid for it, and then to go back to another way before, because I did so much at Delta College. I was very involved in the LGBTQ plus community, and that college had both a student organization and a staff and faculty LGBT organization for itself. We did things like the Human Library Project, where you got to interview people of different cultures. I was assigned to coach the commencement speakers every year. So that was really a fun element. And I also had the opportunity, when you're a full-time professor at certain colleges, you can take the classes at those colleges tuition free. So I took the entire American Sign Language program, and I learned ASL and conversational ASL. And then I fell out of that pattern because in order to stay fresh, you have to know a lot of deaf people. Right, in 2017, I decided to leave teaching college. Like in my mind, I was like, I am done, right? I decided to restart my life. I discovered yoga and I taught yoga. I became a yoga teacher. So I did a 200-hour training program for that. And that kind of became a spiritual path for me. And then it came with a lot of other credentials. So now I am also a Reiki master or healing touch professional. And I am a sound healer. I have a lot of different sound healing tools like Tibetan singing bowls and other relaxing things. I not only taught at the yoga studio, but I was a manager at that studio. I didn't own it, but I helped. I was like the assistant manager for it. And then I also, for a second, opened my own small business out of that. So I was offering healing arts in like a small brick and mortar space out of there. Ultimately, what I learned from those 2 years of doing just that work aside from teaching was more valuable than I ever gave credit for, because up until then, I had gone from school to college to teaching college. I had always been on a 16-week increment schedule my whole life. And then finally, I got to really experience the world, how the rest of the world operates. I learned how businesses work. I learned how taxes work. I learned how, marketing and networking and all of those things, and so many things that you don't see unless you own your own business. You really don't see how much work goes into it. You just go and buy the things you need, right? I also had a part-time job being a professional cheesemonger, and I know more about artisan world cheese than anyone should know, but it was the most delicious job that I could ever ask for. Ultimately, running my own business wasn't my life's calling. Entrepreneurship is not within my heart. So I loved all the gifts that I was giving, but the marketing, the networking, that sort of stuff, that wasn't for me. And it wasn't supporting me. So I knew, okay, I've got this education, I've got my master's degree and background. I decided once again to start my life over. And I applied to all sorts of colleges all over the country. In summer of 2019, I applied to like 20 different places. I was willing to move. I don't have family in one particular place or the other. So I just applied to a bunch of places. And I didn't hear back for a really long time, assuming I just didn't get a job. I had interviewed at one place in South Dakota, and I'm very glad I did not get that job. And then at the end of July, Spartanburg Community College called me up and they said, we want to interview you tomorrow. And I said, okay. So we did a Skype interview. I did a teaching demonstration out of the apartment I was living in. Luckily, I had a chalkboard in the room. And it was just part of like what I have there. And I wowed them as best as I could. And then the next day they called me and said, we want to offer you the job. So I thought about that and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so quick. And so this was the last week of July. They called me and offered me the job on July 27th. And they said, great, you start August 5th. So in 1 week, I had to close my business, pack up everything that I could possibly shove into my little Pontiac Vibe. And I moved down to South Carolina from Michigan without knowing anything about the area or anyone here. And I thought that I could handle it because I grew up in a military family. I've moved a lot my whole life, but actually I lived in Michigan for a massive portion of that. And I didn't really take into account how scary it would be. Here I am at Spartanburg Community College, and it couldn't be more beautiful and more welcoming. For one, the weather here is amazing, right? I also learned that no matter where you live, the locals will complain about the weather. I love it here. So SCC does a lot of cool things that I don't think other community colleges offer. We have a mobile farmers market that comes to our campus every week. We have food trucks. We don't really have like a cafeteria or a restaurant on our campus. So they offer food truck service to support local businesses and to feed our students. And some other neat features. Let me see here if I can, some other neat features is that SCC has a horticulture program. This is the only community college I've ever heard of that has a horticulture program offered. So there are beautiful gardens And sometimes the lizards that live here also get into the classrooms. But these are all photos I've taken of our campus myself. And this bag of food up here in the top corner is straight from the horticulture garden. Every year at harvest, they allow the faculty to take from the garden to weigh the like, you know, they need to measure their outcome, but ultimately we get fed at the start of every academic year, which was wonderfully welcoming. So I just started here in fall of 2019, and I really do love teaching at the community college level. But not 6 months into my work here, what happened? COVID happened. So my very second semester here, two big things happened in my career that I wasn't expecting. One of the other full-time public speaking teachers had to take a leave of absence that semester. I was teaching 8 college classes that semester, and all 8 of those classes shifted to online and Zoom. So I was so overwhelmed. I went into like a depression of being closed in from working from home. I wasn't allowed to work in this beautiful office that I have set up, which is a big part of my productivity. And my students were on the same boat, right? They really just did not want to learn by Zoom. This was not the, you know, we were at that peak moment of our semester of like, we're finally creating this like safe environment. Their speeches are so good and they're starting to support each other. And now we've like shifted to video format, and it kind of took everything away. So in this past fall, when there was a decision to come back and have some of our classes be face-to-face, but our students are required to be masked, we socially distance them, and we offer, I now have been teaching in 5 different formats, whether it's some form of flex, hybrid, whatever you want to call it, synchronous, that sort of stuff. There was a big fear of coming back into that classroom. Are we putting ourselves at risk? Are we putting our students at risk? And it just totally made me think back to that moment in 1999 of like, this is not necessarily a safe profession. If you want to be a college professor, you have got to be able to be willing to be in the public, more so than in retail, more so than in food service. You are servicing, in community college, you are servicing your community, right? And also you have to be able to communicate in a variety of different ways to every kind of possible person, recognizing through the years that everybody learns differently, everybody is motivated differently, everybody is, you know, they all work a little bit differently, learn a little bit differently. So you have to be able to find all of those mixed things. Through the years, I've learned that great teachers have love of subject, first and foremost, and also love of people or love of their students. And if you lose any of that love, it's time to like take a break or walk away, because ultimately it will just like crush your soul a little bit. I've heard jokes that no one becomes a teacher for the money. None. So if, you know, the money aspect is really what you're looking for, I would say when you're looking where to work, think about what community you want to service first, right? That's more important. So I had a semester where I was teaching super rural, middle of the sticks community college, inner city community college, and then elite private university. I had that experience of one semester of all those different types of students to see that variety. So my Saginaw students in Michigan would come into school and be like, oh, did you hear who got, right? My private university students would come in and be like, oh, if I don't get an A, my dad's gonna kill me. And then my rural students way out in the sticks, I took them on a service learning trip to New York. They had never left Michigan. Right? So I got to show them the city and teach them like a lot of those different things. So there's all sorts of amazing opportunities that being a professor can provide in your life. You will never know what's going to come. And that is like the thing I love, is that I'm never bored. There's, you can't be, if you appear bored, someone will give you something else. Right? They'll be like, you're not doing anything. Hey, how about you be part of this committee or something like that? So one other thing I'm doing here at SEC is an advisor for Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society as well. So it's just all these clubs and cool things that you can do. You have to wear a lot of hats. It's not just teacher. You're a coach, you're a motivator, you're an accountability buddy. A lot of it is just accountability and keeping people accountable. You have to be a support system, and you have to know a good balance between rigor and compassion, right? We want to stick to the rules to make it fair, right? But at the same time, life happens to people. And I really like that balance. The role of being a professor has changed over the years. It used to be in the 70s and 80s that I was the manufacturer and the student was the product, and we're sending that person out into the world. Hopefully we've made the right types of people for the jobs that are going to exist. But now we have a business model. So I am not the manufacturer anymore. I'm the product, right? I provide the information. I'm just the product now. And our students aren't the product, they're the consumer. So understanding that, then you understand that this is why teachers don't get paid very much. This is why it's like, well, it's about profit. It's about marginalizing that tuition a little bit. And so just understand that whatever role that you take as a professor, it's going to service the students' needs first, right? They're the ones paying for this, so to speak. And that's been a source of contention and annoyance, but also very, like, once you see it that way, it can be a really good thing. But the biggest perk probably is that I have a lot of independence in my work. When I was working at the yoga studio, my boss was helicoptering over me, making sure I was super detail oriented, gave me a ton of anxiety. It was very difficult to work for a very demanding person who's also my mentor, right? There's a lot of loyalty, but at the same time, I want to do my job right. And now I have a department chair. People do overlook what I do, but as long as I'm doing what I need to by a certain deadline, truly everyone leaves me alone. I have freedom and independence in my job, and I'm allowed to just like be here and have a lot of fun. So wow, I knew I had a lot to say, Ms. Palmer.
Awesome.
I knew this is what was going to happen. You've got it.
Sum me up in 30 minutes.
Thank you so much, Katie, for sharing all that. I'm going to circle back around to two things real quick. And one of them is, I love the word accountability buddy. I wrote it down. I'm going to be using that. Accountability buddy. I love it. And secondly, you know, I agree, teacher to teacher here. We don't get in it for the money and we don't do it for the money. But I also want students who are considering a career in teaching to know that I have had a very good life and have had all my needs met, and I have made a living at teaching. And you pointed out, it's more profitable, it's more lucrative than being in that yoga studio. So there is something to be said. I mean, you can make a living as a teacher, and you're not going to get wealthy. You're not going to have your own private jet. That's true, but you can make a living as a teacher. So
yeah, I agree. I agree to that. And I shouldn't bash it too much because I am being supported and I have benefits. And that's why I went back in. Like that was one of my biggest things. So it is, I'm fine now. I'm doing good. You're right.
Yeah, and that is one of the, I'm glad you said the word benefits. It's one of the really cool things if you're investigating careers. Teaching, especially public teaching, public schools, including community colleges and universities, there's great, you don't just look at the salary, look at the benefits package, because as my seniors have been learning, cost for health insurance, cost for, I mean, all of those benefits really play into how much you're actually making and how much you're actually spending.
I'm considered a state employee.
Okay, there
right?
You go.
So you get state benefits. So it just depends on the state that you're working in.
And as I'm looking at retirement, it's wonderful to have been a state employee and now be able to count on that retirement that's coming before you know it.
I would recommend, if you really want to go off and be a college professor, go straight into getting your PhD. A master's degree is starting to be this middle ground that isn't sought after. And it was very hard for me I'm so lucky I got the job that I did because it's very easy to be outbid by people with a PhD. Even community colleges now almost require a PhD in order to be a professor.
They do, yeah, and know that you're going to need to write also. Yeah. So writing skills, start working now. In fact, that's my last question, and then I think we're going to be running
We're
out
gonna
of
be
time.
done,
But
yes.
what can students who are interested in being college professors, community college professors or college professors, what could they be doing now in high school to get ready for that?
Well, they have the skill set that a lot of us are missing, and that is always being up to date on the newest, latest technology. So if we learned anything from COVID and the shift, it's that the online world and the technological world seems to be a fallback and a savior at the same time. I am super, super lucky that I had at least 4 years of online teaching experience before I got here. And when COVID happened, I was skill-wise far and beyond a lot of my colleagues here who have been teachers a really long time, but they didn't even use like our online classroom format, and they were still using paper to even just turn in the most basic assignments. So I didn't need that training. But yeah, staying up on that is probably, I mean, I feel like tech is the teaching future. Mm-hmm.
Great advice. Great advice.